Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, emerging as a force to be reckoned with. Israel strikes Iranian military sites, vows to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, and bars UNRWA from working within its borders. Plus, an exclusive interview with the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. And CBN partners help a family get back on its feet. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israel's recent strike on Iran sends a strong message to Tehran and the Middle East. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also warns that more strikes may be on the way. Iran is threatening retaliation, which Israel says will result in painful consequences. Here's the latest. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the attack on Iran was precise, powerful, and achieved all its goals.
In the early hours of Saturday, we kept our promise. The Air Force attacked throughout Iran. We severely damaged Iran's defense capacity and the ability to produce missiles aimed at us. All this comes after the last few months where we acted systematically according to a systematic plan to cut the arms of the octopus of Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Yesterday, we hit the head of the octopus, the Iranian regime.
Called Days of Repentance, the operation included 3 waves of attacks, more than 100 warplanes, and struck more than 1,000 miles from Israel. Yet IDF Chief of Staff Pahlavi said Israel used just a portion of its capabilities. Satellite photos show the damage to key Iranian military installations, which may have set back Iran's production of ballistic missiles for years. Israel also destroyed air defenses in Iraq, Syria, and Iran, and knocked out state-of-the-art S-300 and 400 air defenses. Former U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman says it sends a powerful signal to Iran.
But most importantly, I think sending the message to Iran, anytime we want, we got you. Once we knock out your air systems, we have free reign over your country. And we didn't do it this time, but keep it up. Keep up this nuclear program, and you'll see us back here in the near future. I thought that was a great message. I think they accomplished some short-term objectives, but I think the long-term messaging, was equally important.
Saudi Arabia condemned the attack, but did not mention Israel.
The Arab world is condemning publicly, the GCC, the Arab League, condemning the attack publicly. But the secret in the Middle East is don't listen to what people say, watch what they do.
Dr. Dan Diker, president of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs, says Israel is emerging as the strong horse in the Middle East.
The Arab world knows that what Israel just did to the Iranian regime and what it did to the Hamas and the Hezbollah by killing off their leadership and decimating their command structure is to actually kill the arch enemy of those very Arab countries that were condemning Israel.
Iran issued a combination of bluster and restraint following the attack. The commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps threatens the consequences of the attack in Iran will be unimaginable for the state of Israel. Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei warned Israel.
They are yet to appreciate Iran's power, capability, creativity, and willpower. We must make them understand those.
On Sunday, Israel remembered all those soldiers, police, and security personnel who fell on October 7th and throughout the war. Israel's President Isaac Herzog honored them.
The most moving faces of the Israeli mosaic, Jews and Druze, Christians and Muslims, from various perspectives and ways of life, who sought to protect the state of Israel and its citizens with devotion, determination, and a sense of unmatched mission.
Speaking to the Knesset, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. He stated, stopping the Iranian nuclear program is at the forefront of our minds. Netanyahu says Israel proved it can target Iran's nuclear facilities after Israeli jets easily wiped out Iran's ballistic missile production.
These are industrial death factories on an industrial scale, and we dealt them with a real blow.
In last weekend's attack on Iran, Israel avoided bombing the Islamic regime's nuclear facilities, but their ambassador to the United Nations says that may not be the case next time.
To Iran's leaders, take this as a warning. Israel has shown restraint, But from here on, you will see only strengths. Any further aggression will be met with consequences that are swift, painful, and decisive.
Meanwhile, Iran threatens to retaliate.
We will use all tools available for a decisive and effective response to the Zionist regime's aggression.
If that happens, the U.S. is pledging to defend Israel from the Islamic regime.
Today, the United States' message for Israel remains clear. We will always help secure its people and territory from Iran and its terrorist proxies and partners.
Also at the Knesset Monday, the members passed laws barring the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, from operating in Israel. UNRWA is one of the world's main providers of aid and education to Palestinians. But Israel has presented evidence. Some UNRWA employees took part in the October 7th atrocities and claims hundreds of its staff still have ties to terrorists.
UNRWA, as an organization, is infected with terrorism. Not a few bad apples, as UNRWA employees like to make out. UNRWA simply must be replaced. That is the view of the Israeli government and the overwhelming majority of Israel's people. They must be replaced with other organizations that are not infected with terrorism.
Coming up, Bill Koenig from Watch.org gives his take on recent events in the Middle East. Bill Koenig from Watch.org has spent decades covering the news in power centers, especially in Washington and the Middle East. He stopped by our office recently to give us his take on recent events. Bill Koenig of Watch.org, great to have you here in our studio once again.
Thank you, Chris.
You're a watchman on the wall, and just a few days ago, Israel attacked Iran, a historic strike against the Islamic regime. What's your sense of what's happening right now in the land and the Middle East?
Well, Chris, it was incredible. You know, it's been the conversation of the United States, Israel, and the world for the last couple weeks. You know, how's Israel going to respond to the attack of 181 missiles in October?
Yeah.
And I think it was a brilliant plan. It was well thought out. It was strategic. It came in 3 waves. They took out their incredible missile defense system. We hear about the Russian S-300, S-400. That was taken out. And they've hit some vulnerable sites where the missiles are actually developed. In a lot of ways, they created a situation that Israel can pretty much do what they want to do for a while. And I think that it was 100 aircraft. It was 1,000+ mile trip. Everything went just perfect as best we can tell, and it was a very successful effort, and we thank the God of Israel for that.
Yeah, by taking out their air defenses, does that set up a possible strike against Iran's nuclear facilities?
Well, that's been the talk in the U.S. that Biden and Netanyahu have had some lengthy conversations. Don't take out the nuclear sites, don't hit the energy sites. So I don't know. I think that's coming. Chris, I just don't know what's going to happen and when, but yeah, I think that's coming. That's an excellent point. I think that's what's coming.
Certainly the election is going to be profound for the U.S., but what impact do you think it's going to have here on Israel and the Middle East?
Well, from being here for 10 days, Tanya and I have been here, and people are talking about, we hope Trump gets elected. Person after person, Trump is a much better friend of Israel than Harris would ever be. And Trump did more in office in his 4 years than all presidents combined, and most important, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yeah, on Watch.org, you really keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening here. In Israel, you come regularly. How would you describe the temperature, the pulse of what's happening here now in the Jewish state?
Well, most of our time was spent in Jerusalem for 10 days. The joy of Sukkot, the celebration, in some ways you would have no idea that Israel's getting hit with 100, 150 rockets a day coming in from Lebanon. There's been a few that have worked its way into the Galilee, into Tiberias, Caesarea, Tel Aviv, but for the most part, being here in Jerusalem, it was very joyous. It was, in some ways, just a smaller scale Sukkot celebration. But I think that the Israelis have been hopeful that this will be over soon, continued to focus and pray for the hostages in Gaza. So it's it's so unique and unusual. I think what people on the U.S. side are, have these pictures that everything is just absolutely horrendous and terrible. Yeah. And it's difficult to get here right now because the U.S. airlines have quit flying here until March. But a great time to be here, Chris. I think it's a testimony that we support the state of Israel and also continue to point people to our Messiah.
Yeah. And how can people be praying right now for Israel?
Well, obviously, you pray about this often, Chris. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray that people throughout Israel will come to know the Messiah. I look at Zechariah 12:10 often and continue to pray for Jews and Arabs here in the land, that they will come to know their Messiah.
Yeah. Well, you do a great job, and you've been doing it for many years. Thanks so much, Bill.
Thank you, Chris. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
The relationship between Israel and Iran hasn't always been combative. In ancient times, King Cyrus of Persia restored rights to the captive Hebrews and ordered their temple be rebuilt in Jerusalem. The young woman in our next interview shared her thoughts of how most Iranians view Israel now. Fanush Mazari, thanks for joining us. So glad you're here. You're an Iranian believer. You're here in Jerusalem, but tell us what people in Iran feel about Israel.
So the Iranian people right now, they are so fed up with the regime, and they're just waiting for help. And they're waiting for help from Israel or United States, and they see through the lies of the regime, and they want democracy. So I believe many Iranian people, they know what Hamas is all about. They know the lies of Islam because right now they're at this place economically, mentally. It's just one big open prison, and they just can't have any more of that. So yeah, surprisingly, many Iranian people know that it is not Israel's fault, and it's Hamas and Islam that is the reason for this war.
So they would like Israel, as well as other nations, perhaps the U.S., to help free the people of Iran?
Yes, and biblically speaking, we were always allies up to 40, 50 years ago, even through the time of Cyrus. Persians, the Iranian people, helped the Jewish people in Israel. Esther was a Persian queen, and so we plead for Israel. It is time for Israel to help the Iranian people now.
And yet the regime teaches people, when you were just 15, to hate Israel, to burn Israeli flags, and they want to destroy the Jewish state.
Absolutely, that hate is very well taught. I was 15 years old, and I went with a school rally. I remember being part of burning Israeli flag and just chanting "Death to Israel." It was, if anything, part of every morning at school, but the burning flags were events, field trips that they had us take part of.
You've been taught to hate Israel when you were a child. You came to faith in Yeshua, and now you're here in Jerusalem. What's that like?
It's just incredible to see that this isn't something I chose to do, or I didn't choose to be a Christian, for example. I had my encounters with Christ, and I didn't choose to love Israel. It happened in my spirit. If hundreds of people try to convince me to like Israel or to be a Christian, I would say, you're lying, it's never going to happen. Or if they told me it was going to happen one day, I would say there's not even 1% chance. And just knowing it's God, it's incredible. And I call Jerusalem home. I get heartbroken when I'm about to leave, and I hope one day I live here. But just knowing that none of this is me, and it's by the power and the Spirit of God that He changed me, He changed my heart, He changed my mind. I was one way, and now I'm another way, and the thing in between is Yeshua. A lot of people think that I'm, pro-Israeli, because I hated the regime, but which is good. I mean, a lot of Iranian people are that way, but for me, it didn't happen that way. For me, it happened by the Holy Spirit breaking the chains of lie, the foundations of lies in a moment when I had a vision of Yeshua.
Amen. Well, Farnoosh Maizuri, what a wonderful story. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Up next, an urgent call from Iranian Crown Prince Pahlavi to Israel's neighbors and to his own countrymen.
Amid growing tensions between Israel and Iran, more Iranians are openly calling for the Jewish state to take military action against their own government. Citizens frustrated with the brutal regime believe such an attack could help end leadership that has long suppressed their freedom. George Thomas has more.
Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is urging Iran's Middle East neighbors to stand against Tehran's influence, help support Israel's war efforts, and bring down the dictatorship.
The regime in Tehran is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocents, Iranians, Arabs, and Israelis, Christians, Muslims, and Jews.
Pahlavi, the son of Iran's last Shah, went on social media saying most Iranians want to see their own oppressive government removed.
So I say to you, our friends across the Middle East, our region deserves so much better. But in order to succeed, first, this regime that has held us hostage for nearly half a century must go.
While some Iranians have supported military action against Israel,
if Israel reacts to Iran's action, Iran will respond again and completely crush Israel.
Pahlavi claims the majority of his countrymen would welcome targeted action against the regime. He tells Iranians the real enemy is their own government, led by Ali Khamenei.
The tyrant in Tehran couches his warmongering in Iranian nationalism, but he does not speak for our nation. The crimes his regime has committed against you, our neighbors, are an affront to Iranians and our values.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently expressed hope for peace between his country and Iran, suggesting that a future free Iran could lead to a new relationship between the two nations.
When Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, everything will be different. Our two ancient peoples, the Jewish people and the Persian people, will finally be at peace. Our two countries, Israel and Iran, will be at peace.
Transform Iran brings the transformative power of the gospel to every corner of Iran.
Lana Silk runs Transform Iran, a ministry that operates inside the country, sharing the message of the gospel. She says recent uprisings against the regime demonstrate that Iranians want political change like never before, even to the point of dying for it.
It's a tough fight. They're willing to fight it. They're willing to pay whatever it takes to take down their government. We've seen Iranian people take to social media and invite Israel to attack them on their own soil.
Videos from Iran showed people singing and dancing following Hassan Nasrallah's assassination. Silk adds that most Iranians do not share the government's animosity toward Israel. Since taking power 45 years ago, the regime's clerics have labeled the United States as the Great Satan and Israel as the Little Satan.
I was brought up in the country and I was conditioned to hate Israel and America. As a schoolgirl, we had to wake up every morning and chant death to America, death to Israel. All our teaching, our education, all the propaganda and the news on the walls, everything was set up to have us hate these two countries. And yet we don't. No matter how hard the government tries, they cannot turn their people against these countries.
During an interview with CBN News, Pahlavi said despite Iran's ongoing violations of religious freedom, people are turning to faith, especially Christianity, like never before.
The discrimination started against religious minorities. The Jews were the first, followed by the Baha'is. Lately, it's been mostly the Christians that are targeted. Iran has probably right now the fastest growing faith in Christianity than any other faith that the country has had. We have hundreds of underground churches.
Silk says the potential for war is driving a sense of urgency among underground Christians in Iran to share their faith.
We're talking about war. We're talking about really unimaginable suffering coming to Iran shortly. So there is a sense of we better be quick to make sure all the people that we love know who Jesus is and what he's done for them before it's too late for them.
George Thomas, CBN News.
Still ahead, putting their lives back together, one family returns home with the help of CBN partners.
As the war continues, so many families find themselves displaced or struggle to resume their lives after their homes have been hit. The family in our next story needed extra help in moving forward, and thanks to the support of CBN partners, they got it.
The sirens sounded, it felt different. A whistling noise, as if something was falling from the sky. It felt very close. We heard the sound and my husband says, "Run." We dropped everything. I left my coffee and we ran.
Seconds later, a Hamas rocket crashed through the adjacent room, destroying many of their belongings and rendering their apartment unlivable.
My husband had to force the door to open, and then this sharp black smoke. The kids were scared. I was shaking all over. Everything went flying. Everything that was in these two rooms was damaged. The only room that was fine was the shelter, where we were hiding.
A gaping hole consumed one room while shrapnel damaged the entire apartment. It was a miracle the family of 6 survived.
This is our safe room. If it wasn't for this room, we might not have made it out.
Anatoly and Luba are immigrants from Ukraine who settled in Sderot. On October 7th, the family lost many of their belongings and had to find temporary housing. And for months, they lived out of boxes and slept on air mattresses. Luba turned to a CBN partner, Rena, who had helped her when she was a new immigrant.
Many thanks to Rena. She got me through the many things I was worried about.
Rena reached out to our CBN Israel Victims of Terror Department to see if CBN could help.
The children's beds, the furniture, it was a big expense. How would we pay for it? How are we going to figure this out? What should we do?
CBN Israel provided Luba's family financial assistance that covered the purchase of new furniture and helped them get a sense of home.
It was thanks to your organization that we were able to buy these things, bring the kids back home and give them their own room back. It was important for them.
Thanks to your generosity, CBN Israel also provided assistance that covered the purchase of a new computer for the kids after their room was destroyed by the rocket impact.
It gave us some hope, a relief in our hearts. It felt wonderful, knowing there are people who care. It was so important. I went through many painful and difficult moments in my life. Your help is a big, bright light in this situation.
We're so grateful for our CBN partners helping families like the Boytels in Sderot. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for the hostages, for the safety of IDF soldiers and all those caught in harm's way, and for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm Chris Mitchell, and on behalf of all of us at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.